Gary Donahoe and I met at a function later on, and he wanted to thank me for leading the lawyers rally. And he told me when I took my oath of office and I swore an allegiance to defend the Constitution against enemies, both foreign and domestic, I never thought about the concept of domestic enemies until Andrew Thomas started coming after me. That has always stuck with me. And
Yeah.
Trump is a domestic enemy.
Welcome to Law and Chaos. Today we're joined by Arizona trial lawyer Tom Ryan to discuss the crazy election litigation in his home state. Spoiler alert, he does not think that Kari Lake is about to overturn the 2022 election and unseat Governor Katie Hobbs. But Lake did manage to get herself sued for defaming fellow Republican Stephen Richer, the Maricopa County election official whom she accused of stealing the election from her. It's a politics-heavy discussion, particularly in light of Kirsten Sinema's recent decision to quit fire herself from the 2024 race in what was the most annoying Senate speech of the week until Katie Britt stole her thunder. We got a lot to cover, so let's get after it. Hey guys, it's Liz Dye. I'm very excited for today's deep dive into Arizona politics and law with my buddy Tom Ryan. But before we get there, I just want to spend a couple minutes talking Trump news. We are rapidly getting to rubber meets the road time in the Southern District of Florida documents case. That is, Trump has filed several motions to dismiss, and Judge Cannon is going to have to either deny them or prove herself to be the embarrassing hack we all know her to be. So far, she's played it slow as molasses while taking some gratuitous shots at the prosecution. But she hasn't done anything really crazy, or at least not crazy enough to force the special counsel to seek review by the 11th Circuit. But this week, the prosecutors responded to Trump's motions to dismiss, and crucially, 2 new lawyers entered their appearance on behalf of the government. That could be a wild coincidence, but those 2 lawyers are the very same ones who argued the Trump immunity appeal at the D.C. Circuit in the election interference case. So I'm thinking not a coincidence. Trump has once again filed a motion to dismiss based on presidential immunity. That argument was already rejected in D.C. by Judge Chutkan and the appeals panel. And as we all know, the Supreme Court granted certiorari, stopping the trial in its tracks. Remember, immunity is a threshold issue, and you get an immediate interlocutory appeal if your motion to dismiss the case for immunity is denied. Trump's claim in D.C. is that he tried to obstruct Congress's certification of Biden's win as part of his official presidential duties. That is dumb, but okay, it is a fact of linear time that he was president between the 2020 election and January 6, 2021. He was not president in 2021 and in 2022 when he refused to return all the records he stole on the way out of the White House, and then blew off a grand jury subpoena for all the documents bearing classification markings, and then induced his minions first to lie about moving the boxes in and out of storage, and then to delete the security camera footage of them doing it. And yet, he still filed a motion to dismiss the case based on presidential immunity because he magically transformed the documents in the White House from classified to unclassified and from presidential to personal records. When did that happen? How did that happen? Was it by telepathy, proclamation, laying on of hands, Reiki? No one knows. His lawyers cannot say, or at least they cannot say in a court document that they're going to put their names on. They just want the judge to assume that it happened and then dismiss the case on immunity grounds. Note that this is not how the Presidential Records Act works, and it would not disappear the obstruction charges. And if those documents were really personal records, Trump could have said so in 2022 instead of hiding them from his own lawyer and then inducing that lawyer to prepare an attestation that Mar-a-Lago had been searched and there were no more classified documents to be found there. Anyway, the special counsel has responded to this in an extremely aggressive opposition motion. So I'm just going to read you a paragraph so you guys can get the flavor, and then we'll double back and talk about why this motion is for all the marbles. He says, Trump's immunity claim here is so wholly without merit that it is difficult to understand it except as part of a strategic effort for delay. Non-frivolous immunity claims are typically subject to interlocutory review, and district court proceedings are stayed pending the resolution of the appeal. Trump knows all this, but his claim is so lacking in merit that a groundless appeal should not be permitted to have that effect. Rather than countenance such dilatory tactics, the court should deny the dismissal motion and certify Trump's immunity claim as frivolous so that he cannot use this meritless argument, disconnected from the actual charges, as the basis for an interlocutory appeal aimed at delaying trial. Okay, so let's game this one out. It seems vanishingly unlikely that this motion to dismiss is going to be granted, even by Judge Cannon. I mean, look, it's ridiculous, and it would likely get her slapped down again by the 11th Circuit. But if she simply denies the motion to dismiss, Trump is going to do exactly what he did in D.C. and take an immediate interlocutory appeal, halting the proceedings in their tracks at the trial court in Florida. What the special counsel is asking the judge to do instead is to designate the immunity claim as frivolous, which would have the effect of denying Trump the stay of the trial proceedings. Alternatively, my buddy Mitchell Epner suggests that Judge Cannon could simply hold off on deciding the immunity motion until the Supreme Court rules in July. So, she could put it in her pocket and still be thinking about it. And honestly, she's taken so long to decide every other thing in this case that it wouldn't even maybe cause a ripple. But to be clear, Trump has argued that Judge Cannon should simply disregard the D.C. Circuit's ruling that there wasn't this blanket immunity for crimes committed as president and not wait for the Supreme Court to issue its own opinion. She should just dismiss this case forthwith. But as the special counsel points out, Trump's argument makes no sense in its own terms. Here's what the special counsel writes. On Trump's view, criminal immunity would shield not only a president who sold documents that contained classified information to an adversary while president, but also one who designated classified documents as personal, took them with him after his presidency, and then arranged for their sale and delivery after leaving office, so long as he initially took the documents while he was president, right? So that makes sense. What Trump is saying is, you can never prosecute me for any official act undertaken in office. So he could, he's the custodian of the records, these presidential records. He could sell the National Archive to Putin and pocket the money and say, well, that was an official act, right? Or under his theory of immunity in the documents case, he could take those records with him, so having first designated them as personal, and then sell them, and there could be no recourse for the government. And that simply can't be the case. That's bonkers. All right. We're not going to know the result this week of that motion. But on Thursday, Judge Cannon is holding a hearing in Trump's argument that the Presidential Records Act not only allowed him to take what he wanted from the White House, but has no enforcement mechanism. So in Trump's telling, the law that was passed to ensure that Richard Nixon did not destroy the Watergate evidence can somehow be defeated by magic words. That Trump can, like Michael Scott declaring bankruptcy, he can say, I declare personal records, and then take them with him, and that would defeat the entire Presidential Records Act. And no, that's not a thing. And also, his argument is that if the former president breaks the law and steals government records, all that the subsequent administration can do is just ask him nicely over and over again to give that stuff back, which, to be fair, they did that for a solid year. They said, hey, give us that stuff back. And then eventually they dropped the subpoena. And when Trump turned the 15 boxes over and the government discovered that there were classified documents in those boxes, they said, we've discovered these boxes. And Trump said, the National Archives did not find anything. They were given, upon request, presidential records in an ordinary and routine process to ensure the preservation of my legacy and in accordance with the Presidential Records Act, which the government points out in its motions this week. Trump appears to have classified those documents in his own language as presidential records, as not personal records. So he can't say everything I took out of the White House is personal records, because he's already said, I gave these records back because they were presidential records and you didn't corner me into doing anything. So that's the state of play in Florida. Hot mess, as per usual. Before we get to the interview, I just want to say thanks again to those of you who showed up to support the show in our first ever Q&A with Stephen Robinson. You can watch it at Law and Chaos Pod on YouTube. That's our channel. And thank you to those of you who support the show on Substack at lawandchaospod.com and on Patreon at patreon.com/lawandchaospod. You guys will get the longer version of today's show, and you'll always get it ad-free. And because it's Monday, I would like to shout out some of you guys here because I really do appreciate you and could not do this without your support. So from Substack, thank you to Jim, Andy, Mary, Mike, Virginia, Ruth, Jamie, Janelle, Stephen, Bill, JT, Liz, Nancy, Liza, Philip, Elizabeth, Majanyan, forgive me if I mispronounce your name, rank member, Scott, inconstant reader, Kharkiv Resilience, and Keith. And from Patreon, thank you to Jason, Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious Eileen, Erica, Corinna, JK, J.K. Gellis, Brian, Eric, Spina, Louisa Dora, Trump No Biden Eats Shit, Mygon, Sean, Jurgen, and followed Liz to her new pod because she's awesome. Oh, thank you. Okay, so we're going to take a brief ad break and we are going to get on with the interview with Tom Ryan. So thanks a lot. See you in a minute.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
And with me today is Tom Ryan. He's a trial lawyer in Arizona who has handled many high-profile political cases, ranging from the Speaker of the House, Arizona Attorney General, Senate President, and Secretary of the State. He is one of the go-to accounts to follow on social media if you want to understand what is happening in the all-important swing state. And he's here to tell us all about Kari Lake and her never-ending series of lawsuits. Thank you so much for being here, Tom.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let's get right into it. Kari Lake is suing. Who is she suing now?
Well, actually, she's getting sued for the first time. And let's talk about, yes, it is exciting. Our Maricopa County recorder, a fellow by the name of Stephen Richter, is suing Kari Lake for defamation. That in and of itself would not be an exciting thing, except for the fact that the lawyers who are representing Stephen Richter against Kari Lake are the very same ones who represented Rudy Giuliani, or sued Rudy Giuliani for defamation and got a $148 million jury verdict against.
Oh, interesting.
So what happened was this case got off to a slow start because the Arizona State University College of Law First Amendment Clinic got in on behalf of Kari Lake, which is just nuts.
Yeah, this is a weird First Amendment. I mean, she's look, maybe we should talk about what she said that he says is defamatory. Like, what were the defamatory statements?
Great question. Look, if all that Kari Lake ever said about Stephen Richter was he stunk as a county recorder, or I have lots of questions about the conduct of the last several elections, generalized things like that, that's within the ballpark of perhaps ability and fairness, whether true or not. But in her case, she went well beyond that, accused him falsely of committing crimes, election fraud crimes that led to substantial death threats against Stephen Richter and his family, such that people have been arrested across the nation and convicted for the death threats that they made against him because of comments made by Kari Lake.
Right. I think she said that he deliberately printed the ballots to be the wrong side so that the printers would jam, and she accused him of feeding 300,000 extra ballots into the machines.
Correct. All of which would be crimes. And that's why this is, if you're going after a politician in First Amendment law and defamation cases, and you just say you're generally a crook or something like that without any specifics, that's probably not going to get a defamation suit, or not a successful one. But in this, she went way beyond that. She accused him of specific felony crimes, really was very inflammatory in her comments. They took the comments from Kari Lake's, quote, war room on her social media accounts, as well as Kari Lake's personal accounts, and they're pretty damaging. The complaint that was drafted was pretty damaging. What happened was the ASU First Amendment Clinic, which appears to be very conservative, decided it was going to get in what we call an anti-SLAPP defense to the lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Give me 2 seconds to explain anti-SLAPP.
Do it.
Anti-SLAPP is saying, hey, we're not going to let elected officials use defamation law to shut down legitimate inquiries.
Right. It stands for strategic lawsuit against public participation.
Exactly. And I tweeted quite extensively about the First Amendment Clinic getting involved and what a disaster this was going to be. The First Amendment clinic really should be helping local media in Freedom of Information Act requests, helping them obtain information and data in lawsuits, and instead they jump in on this side. We suspect that there's probably some very big conservative funding that got them in this.
That's such an interesting thing and relevant to what we're going to talk about later. But just to flesh that out, anti-SLAPP laws protect the First Amendment right to speak on topics of public importance. And they're saying that this lawsuit is trying to squelch Kari Lake speaking on a topic of public importance. And yes, it is a topic of public importance, but you don't have a First Amendment right to lie, right? To defame somebody. And she clearly defamed him by saying that he committed crimes.
Exactly. And here's the thing that's disappointing about the ASU First Amendment clinic. One is they could have gotten in on a very limited basis, which is we're just going to pursue the anti-SLAPP thing. That's it. They have the right to do that, but they didn't. They jumped in web feet, ducks, and bills all the way into the water. And now they're defending a person who has an incredibly sizable PAC money behind her that didn't need public assistance. This is public assistance to do this. And the good news is this. The First Amendment clinic got its fanny kicked at the trial level. They appealed it. They got their fanny kicked at the Court of Appeals level. And then they petitioned for review to the state Supreme Court in Arizona, where once again, they got their fanny kicked and tossed back to the Superior Court. Now the fun begins. And here's what I mean by that. Now they get to go discovery. They get to get emails and social media accounts and text messages, all the things that Rudy Giuliani got in big time trouble for in his defamation case for refusing to turn it over. We strongly suspect we'll see similar tactics by Kari Lake in the state of Arizona on this, which means we will see very similar kind of penalties and punishments imposed by the courts on Kari for not turning over this information.
Okay, so she's in the analogous spot. This is where Rudy Giuliani went wrong because he hadn't preserved his emails, or if he had preserved them, he refused to hand them over. Is this the current campaign that's being sued, or is this the 2022 campaign that's being sued?
It's the 2022 campaign in which Kari Lake she still has a lawsuit going saying I'm the actual governor of the state of Arizona, while at the same time she's running for the U.S. Senate in the state of Arizona.
So this is a sort of a weedsy lawyer question, but if the 2024 campaign, because she's running for Senate, does the 2022 campaign have any assets, so to speak, right? Like Rudy Giuliani is more or less judgment proof is the consensus. Maybe he has $10 million. He certainly doesn't have anything like what
148 million. No, he filed bankruptcy.
And he's still being sued by Dominion and Smartmatic and, God knows who else. But I'm wondering if the campaign of a two-year-old election is going to have any assets, or what does Richard think he's going to get at the end of this?
The great question. No, there's probably very little in the way of assets in the 2022 campaign. No, it will not apply to the 2024 election committee for U.S. Senate. But they've sued the War Room. They've sued Kari Lake individually. I suspect that what's going to happen is Kari Lake will do much like Rudy Giuliani and file for bankruptcy. And again, I think the judgment's going to be very substantial, and she will not be able to post a bond. And she doesn't have top-line lawyers representing her right now. So here's what's going on, and this is important for you to understand, for people listening to this, and I know you do. What's going on with all these election lawsuits? I mean, Arizona has more than its fair share of them, because they're trying. Arizona is a perfect state to try this methodology, which is to destroy confidence in the election system. Arizona's election system has been strong and safe and effective for decades. We were one of the first ones to use the right to early ballot mail-in voting, which was perfect. It was, in fact, started by Republican Governor Fife Symington. The Republicans, by the way, were very effective at using it initially. But instead of acknowledging that they weren't putting up great candidates and that they were losing, they said, oh, it must be this system. No, you're putting up some pretty stinky, crappy, crummy candidates. In a state that's supposed to be a red state, how is it that the governorship, the Secretary of State, and the Arizona Attorney General's office, all three statewide offices, went the Democratic this last election cycle? It's because the three candidates they put up against them were just wacko conspiracy theorists.
Okay, so tell me about all of the lawsuits that are going on, because there are so many there, right? I mean, you just said Abe Hamadeh. Abe Hamadeh, is he still suing?
Oh yes, he's in court. He's been sanctioned. His attorneys have been sanctioned, and he's still going on over the 2022 election cycle. What's all this about? Because this is important. I started off by saying, hey, it's about the election, destroying confidence in the election system. Not a good thing to have happen. It's also about grifting. I mean, the dumb thing is,
for sure,
all these candidates are out there grifting money. I've got another lawsuit. I need your help. Come in and help me raise money. And God love these poor, low information people that give them tons and tons of money. I mean, there might be $5, $25, but they do it. And they really believe they're going to help them. They're the same ones that give a guy who's a self-proclaimed billionaire who flies around in a 757 with a gold-plated toilet, money for his defense of his cases.
Right. So can we talk, because we talked a bit about Barry Goldwater. You want to talk about the Goldwater Institute?
Yeah, first off, I think the Goldwater Institute is purportedly a libertarian institute set up to protect, things like the Bill of Rights. What it really is a Koch-funded AstroTurf organization that is there to destroy regulations, support commerce, and now it's spreading its tentacles out into destroying confidence within the election system. That's in my estimation. So we're now running out of election contest lawsuits, but here we have the Goldwater Institute and Center for Arizona Policy, a self-proclaimed right to life anti-abortion group, suing our Secretary of State over our election procedures manual.
Right. And you have a really good Secretary of State. I mean, you talk about why are Republicans having bad results in these elections. In part, it's because their candidates suck. But I think Fontes is a pretty good candidate.
Fontes is an excellent candidate. He is a lawyer, well steeped in election law. He's a former Marine. When he lost his election as a county recorder, the elections person in Maricopa County, to a Republican, Stephen Richter, who was pretty hard on him, he was very gracious in the handoff of the office to Stephen Richter. Richter now, I think, realizes, I see now what Adrian Fontes was dealing with.
Right. Because remember, Richter is the one who is suing Kari Lake.
Correct. Keep your eye on that lawsuit, because that one's going to be the next Rudy Giuliani level defamation claim. But so what's happened is this. First off, the election procedure manual is an administrative thing. All right. So if it's an administrative thing, as a lawyer, you and I both know that if you want to challenge something that's an administrative thing, you have to go through the administrative procedures to challenge them. So if you disagree with something that the Secretary of State is changing in the election procedures manual, there's an administrative process to go through that you have to challenge that. If you don't take advantage of that process, you don't have a right to sue. So that was part of my whole tweet thing, is that you don't have a standing if you haven't gone through the Arizona's Administrative Procedures Act, which they didn't do.
Let me just jump in and explicate that for the non-lawyers.
Sure.
You often have to, nationally speaking, we have something called the Administrative Procedures Act, and I'm assuming this works the same way in the state of Arizona, where you have to kind of file your bureaucratic complaint and say, you guys did this wrong, and you have to exhaust the administrative procedures before you go to the court and use judicial procedures to get what you want. And if I understand you correctly, so the named plaintiff here, I believe, is your Senate president, and he's suing Adrian Fontes, who's the named defendant, over the election procedure manual. But if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is they didn't exhaust the administrative procedures first to say, hey, this is not right, the manual's not right. They instead marched into court and said, you've done it wrong. Actually, I'm going to read you a little bit, because I pulled this lawsuit up, and it was, I read a lot of these lawsuits, and you can tell when they're a real lawsuit or whether they're just kind of a stunt, a political stunt, a performative thing. So
Correct.
This was from the beginning. It said, instead of creating an elections procedures manual, Secretary of State Adrian Fontes has created a vast elections policy manual. While certain sections of this manual are authorized by statute, scores of the manual's provisions are not specifically authorized by statute or are in direct conflict with other statutes. So that's one of those things where it's just like, I don't like what you did, and I'm really mad about it, and you suck. And then you know that it's not a real lawsuit.
Yeah, it's a foot stomp by
Right.
it's a foot stomp by the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, Ben Toma.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happened here is this: not only have they not exhausted their administrative remedies, and you used the correct phrase. I'm very proud of you. You remember that from your law school days.
There you go.
Um, they also have another standing problem. You have to show, in any case, you have to show a particularized injury to you.
Mm-hmm.
There is no particularized injury to either Ben Toma, the Speaker of the House, or Senator Warren Petersen, the President of the Senate. They lack a particularized injury. That's called the Raines Doctrine, Raines. That's a federal doctrine that we've
Mm-hmm.
adopted in the state of Arizona. You have to show a particularized injury to you before you can file a lawsuit. Liz, if I hit you in a car, I rear end you, you have a particularized injury, you get to sue the living stuffing out of me. But
Mm-hmm.
if I get up and say Joe Biden's State of the Union speech was brilliant, and you go, that's offensive to me, that's nothing. You can't, that's not a particularized injury to you.
Right. And we've seen this a lot in a lot of the previous election litigation because most of these plaintiffs don't have a particularized injury. So we talked about Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani sued in the state of Pennsylvania, and he kind of propped up these voters who said, well, in another county, they let you fix your ballot if you screwed it up. And in my county, they didn't let you fix the ballot if you screwed it up. And so I want the other guy's ballot, who was allowed to fix it, to be thrown out. And the court said, no, you don't have a particularized injury. That's just different, different counties were allowed to have different procedures. And that so many of the lawsuits that got thrown out were because there was no injury to the named plaintiff. And so it's kind of we don't have to talk about the Raines Doctrine, but the particularized injury, the particularized harm, I guarantee you we're going to be awash in litigation very
Yes.
soon because this is an election year. And it's one of those things where I didn't think I would have to, know this anymore. I didn't think that normal people, non-lawyers, would have to know this. This is one of the things you're going to have to know.
Yes. So here's the last thing. Let's just say some crazy judge who's acting irrationally, arbitrarily, and capriciously and says, oh my goodness, Warren Petersen, Ben Toma, you're absolutely correct. This election procedure manual has to be thrown out. All that happens is the last one comes back into effect, which their
Mm-hmm.
work, contrary to what you just read in the opening statement, is really not different at all. So, what are they accomplishing here? Nothing at all. This is all, as I said in my series of tweets, this is performative litigation being pursued by Warren Petersen and Ben Toma. And the same thing with where the Goldwater Institute and CAP are suing Fontes for Prop 211. And I can explain that. I started telling you before that Arizona has some very progressive elements to it. And one of the things we have what we call referendum. We can do referendums and we can do initiative. This was an
Mm-hmm.
initiative by the people. We had to get several 100,000 signatures on petitions to put Prop 211 on the ballot. It was passed overwhelmingly by 73%. I mean, it was
Right.
huge. Prop 211 says we're done with dark money. Arizona is ground zero for dark money. We are done with that. We want to shed the white hot spotlight on who's giving money in our political campaigns. And so now we have the Center for Arizona Policy, the Right to Life group, saying, no, 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 we don't want you to know who is giving us money because you'll come after us and intimidate us. And
Mm-hmm.
then Goldwater Institute said, oh, this is a violation of the First Amendment right to keep this stuff secret. Of course, they failed to recognize Antonin Scalia's famous concurrence where he said, hey, we're going to allow dark money or we're going to allow money in. We're going to, the Citizens United case
Right.
because you can always, shed light on these things. Oh, wait a minute. The state of Arizona says, yeah, okay, we want to shed light on this. So the anti-abortion group, CAP, and the Goldwater Institute go, oh, we don't want you to know who's giving us money. We will be damaged. So that's the litigation.
Yeah, I have no confidence that that's going to. I mean, I understand as a question of Arizona law, but this Supreme Court, it's going to be dicey. It's going to be dicey there.
Well, here's what I think in Arizona, they've already lost at the trial level. They just recently lost. The Judge Hannah said, what's the harm to you guys? It's not you, it would be your donors. And they're not here.
Oh, interesting. So they might lose on standing.
So,
That would be beautiful.
look, you and I, Liz, are lawyers, but we're also counselors, and we have a duty to our clients. We have a duty to act as guardrails. We have to, when somebody comes and says,
Mhm.
I want to burn down a barn, and then I want to my barn, and then I want to sue the insurance company for the insurance and not be stuck with arson. You don't sit there and say, okay, let me figure out how we can do this. You say, that's nuts. You can't do that. That's a crime. I'm not going to participate in that.
Right.
But the lawyers who are doing this are going, yeah, let me do this. I mean, this is just crazy.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. Well, I do think that part of what they're trying to accomplish here, as they did the last time when they said that the secretaries of states had violated the law by allowing, because it was an election during COVID, and they had made it easier to vote. And that what they are doing here is, as they did in the last election cycle, where they said, well, we can't prove fraud, but you changed the rules and made it easier to vote. And thus, these votes that were taken under these procedures are invalid. Right. So they said that in most of the swing states. They really said it a lot in Pennsylvania. And
And
so I
Arizona.
think what the purpose of this litigation is kind of sowing the seeds for in 2024 after we all vote. And, I don't think Kari Lake is going to win again in Arizona. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, you made it easier to vote, Adrian Fontes, and thus these votes are illegitimate, even if we can't find the fraud, which we're going to also claim.
Right, you've put your finger on something I think is very important here, because a lot of these election denial cases, not only in Arizona but in other states as well, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Texas, wherever the other ones have been filed, they don't come in with evidence. They come in with questions. We're just asking questions. Well, you don't get to
Mm-hmm.
file a lawsuit based on questions. You have to file
Right.
lawsuits based on facts. As you know, lawyers have an obligation to investigate facts, draft complaints based on facts, and things that are supported by the law. Now, you do have the right to say, well, I think the law is wrong. Here are the facts. I think the law is wrong. And I'm filing this lawsuit to change the law. But that's not what's going on here. These are people coming in and saying, we think something bad may have happened here, and we have a right to go find that out. No, you do that on your own. You don't use the court system to do that kind of investigation.
Right. And this isn't the only lawsuit that they're doing. I mean, the Goldwater Institute is financing a bunch of crazy stuff.
Oh yeah, no, in fact, they now have a former lawyer of theirs on our Supreme Court, a fellow by the name of Clint Bollock, and his wife, Shana Bollock, just
Mm-hmm.
got appointed to the state legislature, which many people say, isn't that a conflict of interest? And if he's ruling on legislation she voted on, I believe yes, but he doesn't recuse himself. So there you go.
If I recollect correctly, isn't Shana Bollock the one who Ginny Thomas was sending emails to?
You recollect correctly. Yes, she was very much involved in the January 6th stuff, and with Jenny Thomas. I believe Clint actually clerked for Justice Clarence Thomas long
Mm-hmm.
ago. So that's where he got
Excellent.
his chops, so to speak, to become an appellate judge.
Does he change the balance of that court, or is he just being swapped out for another conservative jurist?
Oh no, he's not. He doesn't change the balance of the court, and I'll explain why. Our governor, first off, expanded our court at a time it was not necessary or needed. He went from 5 justices to 7, and
Mm-hmm.
so he stacked our court, and then he stuffed it.
That was Doug Ducey.
Ducey.
Yeah.
I believe our Arizona Democratic Party is finally waking up to the way that Governor Ducey very effectively gamed our system. We have a process by which our Supreme Court justice and Court of Appeals justices are appointed, not elected. But
Mm-hmm.
the committee that recommends those appointments, not one Democrat was on it. They were all independents or Republicans, and the independents were people who used to be Republicans. So basically, everybody that was on there was a Republican or Republican light. So here's the problem with that. What Democrat who would like to be an appellate judge would waste their time going through this very detailed process to
Mm-hmm.
get butchered in the appellate court appointment commission? It's not worth it. So there's not one Democrat on our board and or on our Supreme Court. And credit to Doug Ducey for stuffing and stacking our Supreme Court with a very non-diverse group.
But you have a Democratic governor now. So Katie Hobbs is your governor. She beat Kari Lake, although Kari Lake is continuing to sue her and say that that's not what happened, and will until the end of time, the heat death of the universe, be suing Katie Hobbs. But Katie Hobbs, is she going to pack the court too?
No, she's not going to have much of an opportunity because they get to serve until they're age 70, and there aren't that many that are close to age 70. I believe there's one. And if he retires or resigns, then she'll have an opportunity. But here's our problem. That commission I told you about before that Ducey has stacked, the people who get appointed to that, they have to be approved by our state Senate, and our state Senate is not approving Katie Hobbs' appointments to various agencies in the state of Arizona. It's like putting them through the blender, and they're coming out in shreds. So they are effectively blocking her appointments, so she's doing temporary appointments. And she finally withdrew all of her appointments to the state Senate for approval and said, I'm just going to appoint the temporary Senate. So now they're suing her because they're saying, you can't do that. And the answer is, I think will come out be, yes, if you don't approve her nominees, the agencies have a right to work. And if you don't approve her nominees, then she gets to appoint a temporary one, and they last for a year.
Okay. What the hell is going on? I mean, what is going on with the Republican Party? And I used to write more about politics and less about law, and I have written many a post about chemtrail Kelly Ward. Is she still the GOP chair, or is she?
No. We just lost our GOP chair, Jeff DeWitt. Now we've got a lady named with the last name is Svoboda, Svoboda. And she is a Christian nationalist and believes that Christ will lead the Republican Party back to preeminence in the state of Arizona. We shall see.
Okay. I mean, it seems to have gone really crazy. Is it because gerrymandering puts these people in positions where you have to run to the right to win the primary, and the primary is functionally the only election? Or is it, what's going on?
You ask a phenomenally great question about Arizona. Can I give a 20-second tour? Because I think it's fascinating.
I would love it. Okay.
All right. When Arizona first started to become a state in 1910, we had a convention here, constitutional convention, and it was during the Progressive era. And Democrats were in control of the state of Arizona. Arizona's constitution is one of the most progressive constitutions in the United States because it was adopted during the Progressive era. Up until World War II, Arizona was very much a Democratic state. But after World War II, as veterans started coming back to the state of Arizona, and many did because our governor and later U.S. Senator Ernest McFarland, drafted the Veterans GI Bill. And so we had a lot of people come to Arizona because, hey, there's somebody that stands up for us. Arizona also became a retirement community. And all of a sudden, in the 50s, there was this shift from a progressive Democratic era into this commerce, what we call country club Republican kind of a thing. And Barry Goldwater led the way. He was a bit of a crazy, as you know, when he was running. Yeah. Lyndon Johnson famously painted him as the guy who would push the nuclear button.
Right, the Daisy ad.
Right. Barry Goldwater moderated over time. But what's happened in Arizona, you have to go back. First off, we have had a longstanding history of racism. That's a very shameful part of Arizona's history. But I'm going to lay it here. I'm going to start somewhere different. I'm going to lay it on the Republican political consulting class, because they were the ones that put their finger in the air and said, we can rely on racism. We can rely on misogyny. We can rely on, and we can play fair. And they were very effective in getting the precinct committee people in place that would support their very hard right conservative stuff, but it got their candidates elected. The problem is, once you put all those precinct committee men in position and you gave them power, what started happening? John McCain is too liberal. He gets sanctioned. Jeff Flake is too liberal. He gets sanctioned. Rachel Mitchell, who stood up and on behalf of Justice Brett Kavanaugh in the crazy hearings, she gets sanctioned. Because she wasn't an election denier. So what's happened
Right.
now is somebody like Jeff DeWitt, who was always a big Trump supporter and was the chair of the Arizona Republican Party. He told Kari Lake, "Don't run," and there are people who are willing to help you out if you don't run. She said, "Oh, that's a bribe." She released the tape. He's gone. The problem is there's no longer a normal center-right Republican Party in
Mm-hmm.
the state of Arizona. As I put on social media this morning, we should effectively quit calling it the GOP. It is effectively Trump's
Right.
political party, and we should call it what it is. It's MAGA. It's not GOP, it's MAGA.
It's completely captured. The party is captured.
Okay, that was longer than 20 seconds. Sorry.
No, that's great. I mean, I do wonder if you think that it is because they gerrymandered. Like, look,
Yes.
is this because your legislature is super gerrymandered? I mean, how gerrymandered is the Arizona, assembly?
It's fairly gerrymandered. And
Mm-hmm.
here's the problem. Arizona has something known as the Independent Districting Commission, and they are supposed
Mm-hmm.
to, every 10 years, based upon the census, set legislative and congressional districts. But as I told you before, Governor Doug Ducey tipped the scales, put no Democrats on. And so when they were designing these legislative districts and congressional districts, they clearly put their finger on the scale. For example, and it's funny because some of the really hard right Republicans got kicked out of their seats, which brought in even further harder right
Mm-hmm.
Republicans. We have Justine Wadsack, which is a great name. Justine Wadsack from Tucson, she's not just a Wadsack, she's a crazy sack. I mean, and the
Yeah.
guy that she knocked out, I thought he was bad. Then she came in. So we have a problem of gerrymandering here. It allows people like Eli Crane to get in to our congressional district. Eli Crane is a nutcase. The district Debbie Lesko is vacating is very, very hard right. And everybody that's running for her seat right now they're trying to outdo each other. Who's further right than you?
Right. So it is a function of if the primary is the only election, if you never have to get a single Democratic vote, then you just run harder and harder to the right. And I think that's the same writ nationally for the Republican Party because they've so successfully gerrymandered so many House seats.
You've nailed it. We had in my district. I used to, just so you know, I in what we call the East Valley of the Phoenix area here. It's very conservative Republican area. It's like Orange County is to LA. I grew up
Mm-hmm.
as a Republican, and even though I didn't agree with a lot of the things that people were espousing as I was getting older, I realized if I change my party affiliation, I can't, because as you said, primaries are actually the general election. Many
Right. I
times there
live in
wasn't.
Maryland. Same thing.
Yeah, and many times there wasn't even a Democrat to run in the primary election or the general election. So
Mm-hmm.
my election was the primary. Eventually, I just said I can't belong to this party anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
in 2010, I left when our governor signed what we call the Papers, Please bill or Papers Only, Please bill. That was SB 1070, which was a very racist, crazy, unfortunate, and it was at the height of Joe Arpaio and Russell Pierce and all those horrible
God,
people
Joe
who were.
Arpaio, there's a name. And he's
Uh,
still kicking around.
he's still kicking around. He's running for mayor at age 92. He's running for the mayor of Fountain Hills, and do not count him out because Fountain Hills is crazy.
Okay. All right.
So at any rate, we do have a real problem with gerrymandering. The way to resolve it is going to be we got to get back to the appellate commission. By the way, that appellate commission also selects people for the independent districting commission, and so we
Mm-hmm.
really need to get back to Katie Hobbs pushing her agenda and her selections, and she's got to be smart about who she selects for that appellate court commission because it will affect the Arizona Supreme Court, it will affect the Arizona Court of Appeals, and it will affect Arizona's Independent Districting Commission. I know that's kind of down in the weeds, but it's important.
No, I mean, it is important. And I think that's one of the things that we've learned in the Trump era that, like, the stuff that you didn't think was important turns out actually ignorance is a privilege that we no longer have.
Years ago, we had a county attorney who got disbarred. His name
Mm-hmm.
was Andrew Thomas, and I'll never forget. He was trying to make his bona fides as a hard right candidate and wanted to run for U.S. Senate or governor or something like that. And he started threatening to arrest judges, criminal judges on the criminal bench because they weren't going along with what he wanted. And he was making up false accusations against them. He went after the presiding judge, a guy named Gary Donahoe. Gary Donahoe was about as close to a Boy Scout and a living saint as you can imagine, also an incredible legal scholar. And it was what started the process of Andrew Thomas's disbarment proceeding. I led a lawyers rally of over 500 lawyers down at the courthouse opposing Andy Thomas. It was the start of everything. Gary Donahoe and I met at a function later on, and he wanted to thank me for leading the lawyers rally. And he told me when I took my oath of office and I swore an allegiance to defend the Constitution against enemies, both foreign and domestic, I never thought about the concept of domestic enemies until Andrew Thomas started coming after me. That has always stuck with me. And
Yeah.
Trump is a domestic enemy. And all the MAGA people who say there's no such thing as J6 or they deny elections, they are the domestic enemies to our U.S. and state constitutions, without a doubt.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I also would point out that for Doug Ducey's troubles, Trump kneecapped him, right? Because Doug Ducey refused to steal the state's electoral votes for Donald Trump. And Doug Ducey would have been probably a pretty good Senate candidate.
Yeah. Ducey was on his way to being a U.S. Senator until that happened. There's a famous scene where they were filming the then Secretary of State, then Attorney General Mark Brnovich, and Governor Doug Ducey, signing off on the certification of what we call the canvas, certifying the canvas.
Mm-hmm.
And Governor Ducey's phone rang and it played "All Hail to the Chief."
Yeah, I remember that.
Push the button, turn it down.
Yeah, because Trump was saying, don't do it. And then because Ducey wouldn't fraudulently award Trump the electoral votes, Trump endorsed Brnovich, right? To run against Mark Kelly.
But let me tell you something. Doug Ducey was the Trumpiest of all Trumpy governors until that point. And I will, years ago, I read the book Profiles in Courage. I was a fourth or fifth grade. And I've always stuck with the idea that there's always some fulcrum point, critical point, pressure point where somebody has to make that decision. And I will always appreciate, there's a lot to dislike about Doug and his policies, but I always appreciate that he was a profile in courage in that moment. And it mattered. It really did matter.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to valorize Mike Pence for not,
but again,
committing an electoral coup, or, Brian Kemp in Georgia. But when the chips were down, they didn't do the wrong thing. I mean, they did do the right thing, which is not nothing.
Rusty Bauer, our then Senate president, was pressured by Rudy Giuliani and President Trump at the time, and Giuliani and Trump made it known that he wasn't, quote, playing ball with them.
Right.
Rusty is a very devout Mormon, and his oldest daughter was living at his home because she was dying of cancer. They had people outside his home with loudspeakers blaring death threats at him while his daughter lay dying from cancer. That's how vicious these people are. I represented somebody that these people went after, and her social media account not her social media account, but the social media accounts of these election deniers were talking about things like this. This election official needs to be taken out to the desert. There are many vacant mine shafts that she could be tossed down. Another one was somebody should put 3 bullets in the back of her head and call it a suicide.
Wow.
The things that were going on, these death threats to elected officials, administrative officials, being encouraged by Kelly Ward, Kari Lake, Abe Hamaday, Mark Fincham. These are not good people. And that's why Arizona is very conservative still. People say it's a purple state. It's not. It's still very conservative. But they weren't going to tolerate those 3 getting back into office or getting into office. And they did a lot of damage, not only to themselves, but to the state of Arizona.
Well, since we've talked so much about politics, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the big news for this week. What about Kirsten Sinema wandering off? I mean, what happened?
Kirsten Sinema, what an interesting story. She started off as a registered Green and
Mm-hmm.
would march around in opposition to the war in Iraq in a pink tutu. She got elected as a Democrat in the state legislature and into the state Senate, and then but worked with Russell Pierce, which was very odd because nobody on the Democratic side liked or trusted racist Russell Pierce. She came out in defense of him. Senate President Russell Pierce was the progenitor and designer of Senate Bill 1070, the Papers, Please bill.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Russell Pierce was. He associated with neo Nazis. He associated with a lot of these sovereign citizen organizations that patrol the border. He was an angry, bitter fellow.
And she was working with him like 15 years ago?
Yes. And in fact, I shouldn't say I led, I was the attorney. Let's be accurate. I was the attorney for the recall movement that ultimately got him recalled in his very, very, very conservative Mormon
Oh,
district
wow.
because
Mm-hmm.
they saw him as outside the mainstream. So Kirsten Sinema started off first as a very liberal, then moved to a centrist. She ran against McSally, who was a
Martha
very
McSally.
hard right person.
And Martha McSally doubly rejected. I mean, am I correct that she got appointed twice and ran twice and nobody really wanted her there?
Nobody wants Martha McSally in the state of Arizona.
She was not super charismatic, let's say.
No, the most charismatic she ever was at the end, and she recorded a brief congratulations video for Kirsten Sinema when she won, and she had her dog with her, and the dog was lovely, and that was the comment that everybody had.
Yeah.
It's the most
I
the
remember
most
that.
human thing that we saw from Martha McSally. Kirsten Sinema ran a great campaign against Martha.
Mm-hmm.
I come from a poor background. Let me tell you my story, which by the way has been largely debunked as it's not how your life really was.
Right.
And she once she got into the Senate, it was like it's all about me.
Yeah, that was such a weird about face, right? I was really hopeful when she got elected. I was like, oh, she's really progressive. She's really, liberal, and she's not afraid to buck trends. And yeah, well, I was right about the last one. She was not afraid to buck trends, but not in the way I was thinking.
I donated heavily to her campaign when she was in Congress before she ran for Senate. I donated to her campaign, and when she was in the state legislature, she called on me frequently. Hey, let me tell you what's going on, and let me keep you up to speed, and things like that. When she got elected to Senate, everything shut off. She didn't come back. People chased her literally into bathrooms
I remember.
just to get her to answer questions. But she went over to the dark side. She took off in her very first year. She took off for 3 weeks to go do a triathlon in New Zealand in the middle of a Senate session.
Mm-hmm.
She took off a summer session and went to a winery where she had lots of donors meet up with her, and she was there taking venting classes.
Uh-huh.
And she just she had a chance to kill the filibuster. She was one of the 8 that could have and didn't. She famously did a smarmy curtsy
Oh my
in a
God.
cute
Yeah.
schoolgirl dress with the thumbs down. And I think the
Was
turning
that the
point,
minimum wage bill?
that was the thank you. That was the minimum wage bill. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing, and it was just gratuitous, the one thing she did that I thought was very interesting and very telling, she had this just kind of a very young girl outfit on, very garish glasses and colorful hair. And she had a ring on that said F off. And
Yeah,
and
I
she
remember
made a
that.
point of highlighting the ring that said F off. Well, who's that to? Is it to so everybody took it as the dumb thing is everybody took it as, well, she must be me, which was the dumbest thing she could have done. But at any rate, this week she's announced she's not running. She had no path to victory. She left the Democratic Party. She
Mm-hmm.
declared as an independent. She's done a few good things. She's worked a couple times with Mark Kelly to get some bills passed that are going to be good for the United States and good for the Arizona. But in large measure, she's been a wash. Not a wash. She's been a waste. That's the more appropriate thing.
Yeah, right. I mean, look, Mark Kelly, I understand that it's a purple state and I understand that she needs to work across the aisle, but Mark Kelly, he's not what you would call a flaming liberal, but he's effective at least.
Yeah, he's working across. I like Mark Kelly. He's working across the aisle. He's married to one of my all-time favorite people, Gabby Giffords, who was horribly gunned down in a Safeway down in Tucson, where she was doing a town hall meeting to have people come up and meet and greet their
She's
congresswomen.
incredible.
And Gabby is just what a profile and courage, and what a just a lovely, decent soul. I give Mark and Gabby a ton of credit for how they've come through all of this. But Kirsten Sinema, no tears are being shed here, except for a columnist by the name of Phil Boas at the Arizona Republic, who seems to think she was just the cat's pajamas. Every other outlet is looking at her going, "Good riddance."
So, all right, let me ask you then, what does that mean? Ruben Gallego,
Yeah.
congressman, is now in the race.
Yes.
You think he's going to be able to take out Kari Lake? I mean, Kari Lake has so damaged herself, it looks from the outside, but you're there. What do you think?
I think Ruben Gallego wins, and let me explain why. It'll be a close race because
Mm-hmm.
in Arizona, we have people who, no matter what, if they see the R behind their name, they go, "Oh yeah, click." It's just like a
Mm-hmm.
mnemonic for them, man. I'm going to do it, automatic. But let me give you some things that I think will make everybody feel better who are concerned about whether or not Kari Lake would ever get in the U.S. Senate. Number one, Ruben Gallego's from Arizona, and he knows his roots, and he lives his roots, and he comes back here. Secondly, his donations are largely from people. I mean, Arizona is contributing heavily to his campaign.
Mm-hmm.
This coming weekend, Kari Lake is going to be meeting at Mar-a-Lago with Mike Flynn and Roger Stone and Roseanne
Roseanne
Arnold.
Barr, I saw it
Roseanne
today
Barr,
on, yeah.
yeah, yep. She's not raising money here in Arizona. She is. It's another AstroTurf campaign, and it's being raised
Mm-hmm.
by out-of-state interests. The Senate Republican Election Committee, I can't remember its official title, but they're throwing their weight behind her.
Yeah, a whole bunch of Republican senators, the normal ones, all endorsed her. And you
Yep,
guys can't see the air quotes, but you could hear them. The normal Republicans all endorsed Kari Lake
yep,
this weekend. And,
yep.
Kari Lake's
I,
crazy as a duck.
oh, you ought to read her. I bought her book, and I was going to
Wow.
do an analysis of her.
Couldn't you shoplift the book? I mean, I know you're a lawyer, but still.
It's worth it for me. Here's what I said. I bought it so you don't have to. And
Okay.
I was going to I was supposed to be in trial. I had a couple trials and both of them settled. And I was going to sit down and do a chapter by chapter evaluation of her book. Her first chapter of how she decided that this was God's calling is the most bizarre story of her flying in a plane in a snowstorm where all the windows are iced over and there's no heat in the cabin and blah blah blah. And it takes her 11 hours to fly from Phoenix, Arizona to Orlando. Where the hell is she hitting the snowstorm? I don't know.
Okay.
It's a first off, everything the wings are iced over. You will lose lift if your wings are iced over. I read that with a buddy of mine who's a 777 pilot for Delta.
Uh-huh.
He said none of this story makes any sense. Everything about it is just her creation of what she thinks would be a compelling story. That's all you can say
Okay.
about this. So I'm going to go back now that Kirsten's out, and it looks like Kari Lake is going to beat. There is now. Keep in mind there is one other Republican candidate, a guy named Mark Lamb, who is crazier than a bed bug. He had a paintball fight machine company up in Colorado that went bankrupt. He's the sheriff of Pinal County, which is a little rural county south of Maricopa. He loves to cosplay as a cowboy, dresses up in a cowboy hat. Why do they
Love
all have to wear cowboy hats?
it. Yeah. Well, yeah. So last question, since we've talked so much about politics. You've talked about out-of-state donors. Do you think obviously you think it makes sense to donate to Ruben Gallego,
Yes.
to take out Kari Lake? Are there any other races that you think are important, winnable? I mean, I don't think we're going to, even Debbie Lesko's leaving. I don't think we're going to flip her seat, and Paul Gosar can, stay in that seat as the weirdest dentist in Congress forever. Where should the money go?
That is a great question. And I'm going to suggest Arizona's congressional district number 1, where there is Eli Crane, who is a horrible, horrible person, Republican. He's being challenged on the Democratic side by Navajo, a former president with the last name of Nez, N-E-Z. He is going to
Mm-hmm.
have the very powerful Navajo Nation behind him. They want to get rid of Eli Crane. So, putting money into Mr. Nez's campaign would be great. The other one is down in Tucson. Kirsten Engel, Engel. Kirsten Engel is running against Juan Ciscomani. Juan Ciscomani is an AstroTurf. I'm a moderate guy. He is not. He's 99% Trump. But those two, in addition to Ruben Gallego, would be the best ones, in my opinion, to support.
All right. We will link in the show notes to those two campaigns. Thank you so much, Tom Ryan.
Thank you. This was fun.
Law and Chaos Podcast is a production of Raise Ipsa Media, LLC, is intended solely as entertainment, does not constitute legal advice, and does not form an attorney-client relationship. This show is researched and written by Liz Dye and produced by Bryce Blake and Engel. Law and Chaos Pod, copyright 2024, Raise Ipsa Media, LLC, all rights reserved.